Okay, this video is going to help us set up the Your Age program and see how to write that code. We're going to introduce using pseudocode for if structures, and this is something that I think that will help some of the students as far as um, how to start, how to write that if structure. Because some students will look at it and go, I have no idea what to, where to start. And so this will help you, I think. And so what we want to do, first of all, just a brief review over the if structure and how that it works. And so when we look at this example that we have in our notes, in page 2, I think, of our notes, is we have the passing score being stored as 70 for a test, and then you have asking the user for the test score, and then that test score is then stored in line 12, and we'll say, well, let's just say they say 82. And so then when we what happens is then at 82, this return value, this variable call, the compiler looks at this Boolean expression and evaluates 82 is greater than or equal to 70 as being true or false. Of course, that's true, so when it's true, that's the only time it will execute the if clause. And so it'll say, congratulations, you passed. So it makes sense that if the test score is 82, that they would tell the person, congratulations, you passed. Now, outside the if structure, this has nothing to do with the if structure, so this will be printed and it'll say, thank you, your score has been entered. And so if we then were to actually compile this and then run it, and I don't know why it's doing this, so I'm going to pause it. Okay, so we got that to work. Oh, it looks like things got messed up here. Alright, so let's compile it and then we run it, and the score, let's say we put 82, then it says congratulations, you passed, and thank you, your score has been entered. Now let's just say that instead we do a 62. Now, so when the compiler looks at the Boolean expression and says 62 is greater than or equal to 70. Well, that's false. But the compiler will say, okay, this is false, and then it will choose to ignore this. So see, it's making a decision based on whether something is true or false. If it's false, it ignores that clause and then moves on. And then what moving on is saying or displaying, thank you, your score has been entered. So if we do 62, it should not say congratulations, and all it should say is thank you, your score has been entered. And so let's give that a shot. So we go run and we enter in 62, and all it says is thank you, your score has been entered. Alright, so that's how that's working. Okay, so here's what we do with this then, is we take a look at this. Now we're writing a program called Your Age, and I've already written a part of it for you, so all you have to deal with is the series of if structures. So I've already written the code that obtains and stores the user's first name and age. Now based on that age, we want the compiler to make a decision in each of these situations in the chart on whether to tell the user any of these things or not. And so let's get this squared away here. Okay, so if the user is, let's say, is 10 years old, well, it would make sense that the user is going to be a teenager in the future. It would make sense that you can't get your driver's license yet. All the rest of these, oh, well, actually, you can't serve as president of the United States. So those three things should show up for a person who's 10 years old. And so we want the compiler to make a decision on each of these potential outputs. And so in order to do that, we need to write a series of ifs. Okay, a series of ifs. That means that the compiler will engage every if structure that we write. So if you look at the first one, we want the compiler to decide if the user is going to be a teenager in the future or not. So either print that or ignore it, just like we did with the congratulations you passed. Either print that or ignore it. And so what I have down here is we want to write pseudocode, which is code that's false. It's not real. It's not actual code that the compiler can read and convert and end up running. So we want to write pseudocode for the option that the compiler has to choose to execute or ignore. So that's what we write first. And for some students, this has helped them to do this. And so we look at the first row here. We want the compiler to decide to tell the user that either you're going to be a teenager in the future or just to ignore that because it won't make sense. So what we do is right in here is the first option or choice the compiler has is to either print you will be a teenager in the future. Okay, so that's the thing we want to do. Now we want the compiler to decide whether or not to print that. Well, then what you do is you go over here and you go, okay, now write the pseudocode for the condition that must be true. So the compiler chooses to execute this. So remember, you're trying to get the compiler to make decisions on whether something's true or false. Well, what condition must be true in order for the compiler to say, hey, you will be a teenager in the future? And so if you look at this, it says if you aren't at least 13. So if you're not sure what that's saying, then you can go, okay, well, let's look at 13, and let's look at a number less than that and a number greater than that. Now, if they're 14, first of all, you could sometimes just look at the chart. Would it make sense for 14 that say you'll be a teenager in the future? No, that would not make sense because they're already a teenager. Okay, so that one's not going to work. How about 13? Well, if they're 13, they're already a teenager. So to say they're going to be a teenager in the future doesn't make sense. And so we're going to scrap that. So 12, you will be a teenager in the future. Yes, that is true. And so 12 works. Well, how does 12 relate to this boundary number that's given right here? And we know that 12 is less than 13. So in other words, what we're saying then, the condition that must be true is that their age must be less. Now you can just use symbols if you want, less than 13. And there's the pseudocode. This isn't the real code. All right, and then you go on to the next one. All right, the next one. You can't get your driver's license. All right, so print you can't get your driver's license. All right, and so, well, what condition must be true? And so you've written down the possible option here that the compiler can choose to execute or ignore. And then you go, okay, well, now what condition must be true to cause the compiler to say, oh, yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and execute this. You can't get your driver's license yet. Well, if we do the same idea that we did before, the boundary is 16, so we pick something higher than it and less than. Now, if they're 17, does it make sense that you can't get your driver's license yet? No, because you have become 16 already, so you can drive. So that's not true. So we can cross that out. And then it says you can't get your, now 16. What about 16? Now, well, if you're 16, well, 16, you have become 16, so you can get your driver's license. So that doesn't fit to say you can't get your license. Of course they can get their license at 16. 15 they can't. So once again, it's going to be a less than, and not all these are going to be the exact same, so you have to be careful. But it says that then their age must be less than 16, because 15 is less than 16. All right, so any of those ages, they can't get their driver's license yet. All right, so anyways, that's the idea, and we would do that for each one of these. So you're going to have 6 different if structures that are going to be engaged by the compiler, and each one the compiler is going to decide, do I print this or not print this? Okay, now do I print this or not print this? And it's going to be based on whether these Boolean expressions are true or false. So when you go to write your code, then you can now use this. So you can do the if. Now you translate this to code. If, and then their age is stored in the variable age, is less than 13. All right, and then in the if clause, you would write system.out.print ln, and then you would do that print statement that would display that this in here. Remember to call for their name, and then say you will be a teenager in the future. And so you would actually print that with real code now. This is in JGrasp. You would actually type real Java code there, so it would actually do this. All right, so that's the idea, and then you would go from each one of these, you would translate into real Java code in JGrasp, and then you'll end up with a series of if structures that look like this. There'll be 6 of these that look just like what I've just highlighted, or I could say circled. You'll have 6 of those. And that's how that works. And then make sure that you would read the rest of the directions on anything else that needs to happen. But anyway, that's the main idea with this program, is getting the series of if structures that are based on this chart. And so when you run the program, if you do it correctly, if you were to type in 10 as the age, then what should happen is the compiler should print this one and this one and this one. So then in other words, there'll be 3 outputs, 3 characteristics that you would be able to tell, that the compiler would tell the user based on their age being 10. And what you do, and the key thing here, is to test your program with different ages. All right, so make sure you test the ages like 13, 16, 18, 20, those boundary numbers. Test numbers that are above and below those boundary numbers, and to make sure that your output is correct based on looking at the chart. All right, so that's basically how it goes.